Welcome to CSEC Circle, where we discuss the poems on the CSEC literature syllabus.
Why do boys and girls walk around with mirrors all the time? It speaks of vanity, insecurities, believing one's appearance changes from moment to moment, or wanting to maintain flawless perfection, which we know is impossible. Today, we are discussing the poem Mirror by Sylvia Plath.
Mirror. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I am not cruel, only truthful. The eye of a little god, four-cornered. Most of the time, I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink with speckles. I have looked at it so long, I think it is part of my heart. But it flickers. Faces and darkness separate us over and over. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. Then she turns to those liars, the candles or the moon. I see her back and reflect it faithfully. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me, she has drowned a young girl, and in me, an old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish.
The poem is a bit unusual in that the speaker is an object, a mirror, as opposed to a person. The poet, through personification, makes the reader look at the mirror differently and not just as a common everyday thing. The poem is about the psyche of a woman who is caught up in appearance and not wanting to accept becoming old. She goes to the mirror every single morning, even if she's saddened by the old woman who rises towards her day after day. The poem begins with the claim to be silver and exact. At this time, Winnell will speak a little bit about the poet's claim of impartiality. Winnell?
As Shalyn said, the poem begins with the persona, the mirror, claiming to be silver and exact. The idea of silver and exact suggests that the mirror is objective. The suggestion is that the mirror is simply reflecting whatever it sees. And because the mirror is claiming to just simply reflect what it sees, the suggestion is that it is impartial. Literally, however, the suggestion is that it is not as impartial as it is suggesting. And I'm going to leave that just hanging there for someone else to take up.
Okay, thank you, Winnell. Now, at the beginning of the second stanza, the mirror claims to be a lake. I'm going to now invite Sam to talk a little bit about that use of the metaphor. Sam?
Welcome, everyone. The beginning of the second verse is an interesting turning point in the poem, as far as I'm concerned. Because in the first verse, as Winnell just indicated, the mirror begins by stressing its supposed objectivity. It hasn't got, it says, any preconceptions. Whatever it reflects is what is before it. It doesn't make any judgments. It doesn't bring any prejudices. However, the fact that in the second verse, the mirror then says, I am a lake, shows that the mirror, or implies that the mirror cannot be taken at face value as always or even simply, if ever, presenting just the facts or the truth. Because a mirror is an inanimate object. And to start off by personifying itself or being personified, shifts it immediately into the realm of the human, because that's what personification is. And we know that human beings are definitely not objective, that whatever it is we experience is filtered through our organs of seeing and hearing and so on, and our attitudes or upbringing or education or social background and all of these things. So when in the second verse the mirror says, "Now I am awake," it shows, as it were, that the mirror is actually shifting identities or shifting perspectives. And if you're shifting identities and perspectives, then one has to question if you are really in fact being impartial, if you're being objective, and if you can be taken at your word.
Thank you, Sam. Now, as students of literature preparing for the CSEC exams, you need to be aware that you will be asked to describe, where you focus mainly on the content of a work. You will also be asked to discuss some aspect of the work, which is usually thematic, and then you are to examine devices used to bring out the themes or main concerns in the text. So we're now going to look at some of the themes, the main themes that are dealt with in that particular poem. One of the themes we identified would be the theme of insecurity. Winnell, would you like to say anything on this particular theme?
What is really interesting is the suggestion that the persona constantly is going to look at the mirror, because the mirror is for them the gauge about whether or not they're aging. And what they see in the mirror is perhaps what their own internal perception does not give them. And so there is an element of dissatisfaction with what the mirror is actually revealing to them each time they go before it. It's kind of almost like the fairy tale with, I think it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of us all? And the wicked witch, I think she was, or the stepmother, going before the mirror constantly and wanting to hear the mirror say, "You are the most fantastic looking," except that, you know, each one of us has to recognize at some point that our youthfulness goes and that there will be someone else who is more youthful coming along the way, and you kind of just have to accept that you are aging and that your face, your whole body structure, everything is aging.
Okay, thanks for that. And that'll lead straight into the whole idea of old age, Sam, which we identified as one of the other themes in the poem.
Well, I'd like to change that way of referring to that feature of the poem. First of all, I don't like the notion of using a word or two to talk about the themes of a literary work. To me, those are topics or subjects. I prefer to see theme as some kind of assertion which the literary work supports about a particular topic. So instead of talking about old age, I'm going to talk about time and still address the material in the poem that you are referring to. So if you think about it, in the first stanza, the focus is exclusively on the mirror itself. And this is from the mirror's own perspective. And the mirror claims to be the eye of a little god. Now, normally, there's the perception that gods, little ones or big ones, are timeless. They are immortal. They're enduring, perpetual, and so on. Yet, when we look at the second part of the same first verse, the mirror says, most of the time, I meditate on the opposite wall. So the mirror itself, claiming to be objective, an inanimate object which should have no awareness of time, no consciousness of its passage, does seem to be seeking something worthwhile or fulfilling to do as time is passing by. It then describes the appearance of this opposite wall and observes, I have looked at it so long, I think it is part of my heart. So that actually the mirror is fusing its identity with something outside of itself, as though just being a mirror is not fulfilling enough. That fulfillment requires meaningful involvement as time goes by. And in that same verse, the mirror says, I think it is part of my heart, but it flickers. Faces and darkness separate us over and over. And there's at least a hint or suggestion that this separation is for the mirror something painful or undesirable, which as an inanimate object it shouldn't feel, nor as something that claims to be objective. In contrast, when we come to the second verse, the emphasis shifts now from the mirror mostly to the woman and how she seems to be responding to time. And I'm saying seems because the woman never actually gets to speak for herself. This mirror that claims to be objective actually interprets the woman's behavior. Because whatever conclusions the mirror is drawing, and Winnell can speak to those, right, are really the perceptions of the mirror, or perhaps the preconceptions of the mirror, rather than the realities of the woman whom we never hear speaking in her own voice.
Okay, thanks for that input, which brings me to the next main concern we're going to look at, which is it only speaks about a woman. So there seems to be the suggestion that women are the ones who are most concerned with appearance, because there's no mention of any other character, any other person that the mirror seems to be observing who comes to look at it every day. So it just seems to be that women generally, in the same story that Winnell referred to, it's the females, you know, wanting to know who's the fairest of us all. So there seems to be the suggestion all along that women seem to be, you know, more concerned with appearance, physical appearance and looks, as opposed to males. We can just assume that that is the suggestion, one of the assumptions. Okay, that brings us to some of the devices, other devices. We've already mentioned one of the metaphors. Remember, we said that in preparing for the exam, students have to be able to discuss the devices as a matter of fact, that seems to carry the heaviest weight in terms of the examination questions. So we're going to look at some of the devices that are used in the poem. Personification seems to be the most obvious one, since, as we said, the mirror is itself personified. Again, I'm going to go to Sam to expand on that a little more, the personification used in the poem.
Okay. The basic idea behind personification as a literary technique seems to be that writers feel if they can make things which are not human beings seem human, then we, the readers, will feel closer to them and will be better able to identify with whatever experience or event the inanimate object is involved in. So Sylvia Plath, as you said at the beginning, as it were, invites or challenges the reader to bring a new perspective to this commonplace object, the mirror, which people may take for granted, and perhaps to see it in a way that we are not accustomed to seeing it. Now, we know that the world we live in is one in which the relations between men and women are complicated and sometimes painful for one or both of them, right? So as you said, the impression is that it is women who are mostly concerned with mirrors. The actuality is, though, I believe, that the reason women are mostly concerned with mirrors is because men are concerned with women's appearances and use them as a principal means of evaluating their worth and the nature of the relationships. And therefore, if women want to have successful, meaningful relationships with men, then they pay attention to their appearances. So men are implicated or indirectly suggested as part of this poem in terms of how women see themselves. Do I feel fulfilled in myself, or do I look to a man for validation and for appreciation? So the fact that the mirror is personified seems to me to be related to this too, because this poem is as much, I would argue, about the mirror as it is about the woman, or maybe it's even more about the mirror than the woman. So that if the woman is presented as being concerned with her appearance to the point maybe of obsession, the mirror too is concerned with appearances. And the first thing it starts off by doing is saying, I am truthful and you can trust me, right? So maybe it's not concerned with appearance in the sense of its physical shape, although it claims to be silver, exact, and four-cornered, but it's concerned with itself in terms of how other people, in this case the readers, see the mirror, which is basically no different from a woman who's concerned with how other people see her if she's aging as time passes and her beauty is fading.
Okay, thanks for that insight. In line 11, searching my reaches for what she really is. Sam, can we really look in a mirror to find out who or what we are?
Well, I think one can answer both yes and no. I would argue, in fact, that this is the single most important line in this whole poem. I think what has happened is that the mirror, as a character, the speaking voice of this poem, has attempted to perform a kind of trick on us. Like when you watch a magician and you see the magician saw a woman in half and then put the two pieces back together, or do something else which logic says this is impossible, and yet your eyes say it has happened.
It just happened.
So that what we see with our eyes can be misleading, right? Or we may be exposed to an experience which our senses can't comprehend, but the experience is nonetheless real. So I think the deception that has gone on here is that the poet Sylvia Plath, through the persona of the mirror, has attempted to give us the impression that the only thing that preoccupies women is their physical appearance, whether they're aging, becoming wrinkled over time. Then really and truly, that is not necessarily so. And I find it very interesting that there's this line, searching my reaches for what she really is. Because I would want to suggest that nobody at this table and nobody who's viewing thinks of him or herself as merely a body, a physical appearance. That we all know there is more to me than what meets the eye. Yet this mirror claims that is what the woman is looking for. And in the end of the poem then talks about the contrast between the terrible fish that rises from the mirror as a lake to meet the woman in place of the young girl she's drawn. So yes, let's explore that some more.
But the thing about it is, as teachers, we've seen children with mirrors, and they're constantly looking in the mirror. You have to tell them sometimes, what you're seeing 5 minutes ago is no different to what you will see 10 minutes in advance. So why are you looking in the mirror? But the idea of it, though, is we often feel a sense of youthfulness as we age that we are not seeing in the mirror, not reflected in the mirror. That is the whole idea. I think this is what she's actually looking for. I mean, you're aging, you feel as though you are still young, and when you look in the mirror, what you're seeing is not what you're feeling. And I think that is what she is searching for when she looks in the mirror. And there is a kind of compulsion about it. I need to keep looking and looking, because maybe if I look often enough, it will change.
You see something different. Which is, interestingly, as the line which follows is when the candles and the moon are called liars. So the whole idea of being lied to, seems to follow immediately after that. Searching for what you really are and not finding it, but still putting yourself through the torture, so to speak, of looking for it all the time.
But you see, the thing about it is the candle and the moon are both softer in terms of their lighting. So the candle and the moon will make you look really nice. That's the stuff of romance.
Maybe she's searching.
People don't want to see the harshness in the light, in real, true light. And so the candle and the moon will give them that kind of soft appearance. You won't see any wrinkles. You're best in candlelight and moonlight.
Okay.
Could we say, ladies, that perhaps the poem also questions, even if indirectly, the notion that a mirror can truly show you what you are? You know, the Bible says that the eyes are the windows to the soul.
Yes.
How can you therefore see your own eyes if not by looking into a mirror? So does the act of looking into a mirror necessarily mean that you are looking at your physical body, or could it mean you're looking at your soul or into your soul, whatever that is?
It's possible. Again, as we said, the whole thing is open to a variety of interpretations. There's quite a bit. This poem seems to present us quite a bit of material to ponder over.
Mystery.
And yes, it's as mysterious as what she's not finding in the mirror that she keeps looking for all the time. Certain words I used, and they seem to be quite pointed in the poem. Words like swallow and unmisted.
Yeah.
And the whole action of swallowing, it suggests not just surface, but digesting and reproducing, well, not in the same form, obviously. Would you like to say any more on the use of those words, the use of language generally?
Okay, well, as you pointed out, there are two particular words where the mirror says, whatever you see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. So we're going into the realm of using diction. So the words swallow and unmisted, what really do they mean? So when we swallow something, supposedly we digest it. We're kind of, by extension, kind of accepting it. And when we refer to something being unmisted. It means that it's not in any way distorted, and the mirror is suggesting that it is not distorted in any way. But this is the problem. It says, just as it is unmisted by love or dislike, suggesting that there is no kind of prejudice or any of those things involved with it, except that we've been establishing that this mirror is not necessarily impartial, that it is kind of subjective. And so here is the thing. When people are motivated by love, they don't like to face facts. When they dislike someone or something, they obviously will be very subjective in their opinion of that person. So when this mirror is claiming that it is just simply reflecting what it is seeing, we are still questioning whether that is true.
I would like to add to what Vanella has said and possibly qualify a little bit. Now, dislike is clearly a negative thing. It's always a negative thing, so we don't have to debate that. But let's think about love. It is true that love can distort a person's perception of things, right? Shakespeare has written that love is blind and lovers do not see the pretty or petty follies that themselves commit, right? But at the same time, love is one of the most redeeming and ennobling emotions that human beings feel. So love is not only an emotion that distorts or blinds or falsifies. It is also something that ennobles and empowers and allows people to enrich other people's lives. So if the mirror is saying to us that love is always a force or a factor that distorts, that's something that as readers we need to question. We should not be swallowing that whole. We shouldn't be just taking it at face value.
Thank you. Okay, and that brings us to a powerful simile used in the very last line when the mirror says, the old woman that rises towards her day after day like a terrible fish. And let us look at the implications of that word. Well, we have the word terrible, which, as we said, the meaning is undisputed. But why a fish? You know, is it trying to suggest something really unpleasant, something that cannot live in every single, because if you take a fish out of water, it dies. So I'm just wondering, I'm throwing out the question, what do you think, or why do you think that she has chosen that simile, like a terrible fish, like something unpleasant smelling, unpleasant looking? What is it that she's trying to imply by that simile, like a terrible fish, in the very last line?
Well,
any thoughts on that?
Let me say that it to some extent, it is a part of the extended metaphor. The idea of her looking into a lake, and lakes, I'm assuming, have fish. So let us assume that it is part of that extended metaphor. But then let's also look at the idea that if you were a fisherman and you were fishing in a lake, sometimes you pull up things that are not necessarily what you want. And so there is also a kind of intimation or suggestion that when she searches the depths of that lake, what she's coming up with is something that she doesn't want to see or doesn't like. That's my take on it.
Hence it's terrible.
Yes, hence it's terrible.
Okay. Sam, anything to add on that?
Well, I agree completely with all that Winell has said. But I would also add that it's interesting the way in which the mirror, which is supposed again to be impartial, objective, and truthful, is actually switching the language it is using, which means it is manipulating us as readers or attempting to do so.
Yes.
Because the mirror says that the woman has drowned in this mirror, metaphorically a young girl. So if something rises based on what you've drowned, it shouldn't be a terrible fish, it should be a corpse. So it is interesting that the mirror that talks about such impartiality and truthfulness and exactitude talks about a young girl being drowned but a terrible fish rising. Because to be consistent, it should really be a corpse.
A corpse, a wrinkled old corpse.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so there are several interpretations we are open to in the poem. We've looked at various devices that are being used to bring out the meaning, and it leaves us with some questions. Does a woman have psychological issues? What is it that causes her to be so insecure? Remember, we said insecurity was one of the major concerns. Is she constantly searching for her youth? When is she going to accept that it's not going to come back? That this is something that just time cannot be reversed? Is it just a question that she is not coping with getting old? Again, her insecurities could be based on what Sam said, that society puts pressure on women, particularly, to look good all the time, you know, to validate yourself by your looks. So it seems to be clear that the woman was looking in the mirror from the time she was young, because there's a part that says the gradual, the drowning of the young girl is gradual. So it gives a sense of a passage of time. So it seems to have been something that an activity she was engaged in from very young. And you don't see yourself aging from day to day. You know, you wake up one day and say, okay, I have gray hair, but still, it's something that takes a long time. Yeah. But the fact that it's so gradual and she seems to be so unhappy with her appearance, it seems that it has been going on for a very long time. And she still has not found the answers, still looking in the mirror every single day, and seems to be growing more and more unhappy. So I guess the ultimate question we are left with is, why is she putting herself through this? You know, why not stop? But it seems that she is unable to stop. Still on the subject of personification, the mirror says in line 12, she turns to those liars, the candles or the moon. Again, is it objective to refer to things as liars? Why do you think, Sam, that she refers to them as liars, the candles or the moon?
Well, it seems to me that what the mirror is doing is using a stereotypical association. We often think, based on books and movies, and for some people, life too, that in the context of a woman and her appearance, candles will bring a softening, romantic effect to her appearance. We think of candlelight dinners, and the same thing applies to the moon. So one of the conceptions of a romantic interaction between a man and a woman is a moonlight assignation, affair, or whatever you want to call it, a date. So the mirror, consistent with what it's been doing from the beginning, is contrasting the woman's interaction with itself to her interaction with other things, and drawing, in this case, on this traditional or conventional association that moonlight and candlelight make women seem more attractive than they are, conceals their wrinkles, the ravages of time, and gives them a false impression of how beautiful and untouched by time they are.
Okay, which leads us to the mirror's own vanity when it says in line 15, I am important to her. The mirror assumes some kind of importance. Winell?
Okay, so we've been saying for a while now that this mirror certainly is not very objective, it's very subjective. And at this point, this line, I am important to her, is a very, well, it portrays the mirror as being very egotistical, egocentric, suggesting that the woman really cannot do without looking in this particular mirror. The reality is that humans do look in mirrors. I mean, there are some people who look at a mirror maybe 15, 16 more times a day. That is what's being suggested here. But the idea that you can do without the mirror is certainly a really, really strange one here. And suggesting that the mirror is what really defines her as a person. And if she cannot see what she wants to see within that mirror, then that's why there's a terrible fish coming out of the lake. The idea that I can't handle this, it means that something is wrong with me.
Okay, and he continues in the next line. Each morning, it is her face that replaces the darkness. So it's almost as if they have a relationship that they both depend on each other.
Yeah.
Because she must come to me, but at the same time, I'm not enjoying the darkness. I enjoy letting her come to replace the darkness every morning. So there seems to be that sort of dependence from the two of them.
And may I add that it kind of gives the poem a kind of very, almost like a paranormal vibe of strangeness in the way that she's so dependent on this mirror, to the extent that when you look at the idea, I think in the first stanza she talks, or it's the second stanza she talks about the flickering of the lights. The first stanza,
right.
Where there is the movement of light into darkness. Yeah. There is that kind of strange vibe that's coming off of it. where there's that kind of dependence almost
Okay.
on what the mirror is prophesying or suggesting.
Thanks for that. Lastly, we're going to look at the structure, I'm going to ask Sam to look at the actual structure of the poem.
Well, if we pay attention, I think we would agree that Sylvia Plath has obviously put thought into putting these words on the page. The first obvious point is the fact that the poem is divided into two sections, and that there's a particular concept or idea that opens or dominates each section. In the first verse, that is the mirror saying, "I am silver and exact," and comparing itself to the eye of a little god. Then in the second verse, the mirror changes that association to speak of itself as, "Now I am a lake."
Yeah.
So clearly Sylvia Plath has structured this poem deliberately in terms of dividing it into two verses. Secondly, since the mirror says that it is four-cornered, when we look at the poem, even though the right-hand side of the lines is ragged, we can still see that basically it is a four-cornered shape, reflective of the physical appearance that the mirror gives of itself. And finally, if we look at the lineation, we can see there are 9 lines in the first verse and 9 lines in the second, which suggests again that Sylvia Plath is consciously crafting this poem in a specific way. So that while there are poems which are more powerful in terms of the link between the visual appearance of the poem and the subject matter of the poem, this one at least suggests a kind of unity between the voice that speaks and the shape of the poem on the page.
Okay, thank you very much. We have enjoyed discussing the poem, and we have brought some valuable insight into more understanding of the poem. So that seems to be it for this particular poem that we have discussed. I sincerely hope that the students who will be listening and viewing this would find some insight, would be better able to handle this poem in the context of an exam, and that this proves to be very helpful in preparing for the CSEC exams.